Chapter 21. Midnight was coming slowly. Rue decided to scout out the warehouse while he waited. He had broken into this place before. He had broken into most of the warehouses at one time or another. They were full of goods from around the world. Dried food, spices, weapons, books, silks, anything you could imagine. Sometimes Rue had broken in because he was just curious. He might stay the night, read an exotic book, pretend play fight with beautiful swords, or wear robes of the finest silks. He would be gone by morning, leaving the items behind. The warehouses were under Pirate Bowl's protection, in exchange for a monthly fee of course, and no one was mad enough to steal from Pirate Bowl. Rue moved silently to the edge of the warehouse roof. This one was at the southernmost end of the docks, close to where he had emerged from the ocean yesterday. It was always quiet down here, being right at the edge of the cursed town and far away from the unloading docks and taverns. Rue lowered himself over the edge and hung beside a small upper window. Rue had removed the latch years ago, and it was so high up that no one ever checked it. He peeked inside. The place was dimly lit by lanterns that hung over 4 tables. Shadowy figures had gathered around the tables, seated just beyond the light's reach. 2 people, a man wearing a wide-brimmed hat, and a woman, old and stooped, stepped out of the shadows and approached one of the tables. They bowed to each other and sat down. Each placed a whist board in front of them and then placed their dolls into the middle of the table. Another man, well-dressed and cultured, stepped out to announce them. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Your Invitational. This tournament has not been sanctioned by the Order of the Seekers, and as such, regional rankings will not be affected." He took a breath as he stepped beside the seated man. "However," he roared, "reputations are at stake and glory awaits. We are honoured to bear witness as legends collide. On my left is the hero of Roulon, General Hawkins, the once master strategist to the king himself." Rue heard an angry murmur ripple through the crowd at the mention of the king. He was sure General Hawkins' face grew darker under the shadow of his wide-brimmed hat. "And his champion, the unstoppable Cannonball!" The man's doll was large, seemingly made of different-sized metal balls. It had 4 smaller balls that acted as its wheels. Above this floated a battle-scarred cannonball that was the body. Another smaller ball floated high as the head. A white smiling face had been painted onto it. Its 2 arms were also large floating balls, spiked like morning stars. It rumbled back and forth across the table. It looked fearsome indeed, and Rue shuddered at the thought of little Oni battling it. The announcer then stepped beside the elderly lady. "It is with the greatest of pleasure I introduce the undisputed head of the Iron Circle, the White Lady of Iru, the legendary Earth Mender Elsa." The announcer bowed theatrically. "You do us great honour." The elderly lady waved him on impatiently. Rue noticed a few in the crowd had stood and removed their hats, heads bowed. "And her champion, the immortal Crowfoot." Rue narrowed his eyes. Something moved on the top of the old woman's head. Her hair was tied up into 3 buns, and lying in the middle of them was a nest. A small creature sat up and hopped onto a branch protruding from it. It was bird-like, with an owl face made of jewels. It had 4 legs and a long tail ending in a tuft of red fur. A pair of wooden wings spread out, flaring into blade-like feathers. It moved hypnotically side to side like a swaying snake. It looked small compared to the Cannonball doll. The announcer continued, "This will be a blue match of duel, where magic may be performed, but no tiles may be lost in defeat." Rue's eyes widened. Magic! He had to get closer. While everyone's attention was on the match, he lifted the window and slid through. Silently he pulled himself onto the rafters. Here he could sit comfortably in the upper shadows. "All bets are now closed," roared the announcer. "The match may begin." Both players cast their tiles. Rue watched the colours that flared off the boards closely. It did seem the man's board flared a strong blue, while the old woman seemed to favour the green. Both players also seemed to watch these colours closely before turning their attention to their own board. After studying this tile placement for a brief period of time, General Hawkins clapped his hands together and then held them over the board. The old woman glanced up at him and then back to her own board. She grimaced but also clapped her hands together. They both began quickly sliding tiles and the colours leapt off the board. The dolls came together, the huge cannonball rumbling and smashing, Crowfoot sliding and whirling. The bird doll was a green blur, and Roo gasped as it took to the air, circling and diving. Crowfoot could fly! It struck Cannonball several times, rising into the air in graceful arcs before plummeting down and striking the metal head with great force. Though much slower, Cannonball was well suited to face the flying doll. Its whole body floated above its 4 ball wheels, and it could rotate fully around to track the bird. It could also raise its spiked arms to meet Crowfoot's dive bomb attacks head on. Twice Crowfoot swooped hard at Cannonball's painted face, only to have to swerve at the last moment as the Morningstar hands rose up to meet it. The great spikes raked across the bird and green feathers flew. Each time Earthmender Elsa would quickly slide her tiles, and huge orbs of green would leap off the woman's board, gathering up the falling feathers and then finding the swooping bird, restoring it to full health. Roo also noticed that Cannonball was gathering a large amount of the red orbs and had yet to launch a powerful attack. The metal doll seemed content to spin in place, tracking the path of the bird and raising its spikes when the Crowfoot dived. Suddenly the man called General Hawkins stood, knocking his chair back and pushing his palms at the whirling bird. A bolt of purple flew across from his hand and struck Crowfoot, stunning it. The doll fell hard to the ground, the purple magic still shimmering around it. The man then twisted his hand and closed it into a fist. The purple sheen constricted into threads that tightened around the bird like chains. It lay there, trussed up, struggling against its magical bonds. The huge cannonball rumbled forward, casting a long shadow. The end of chapter 21. And if you enjoyed that, leave me a like and subscribe if you want to tune in for the next chapter. Thank you again for listening, and I'll catch you soon. Bye.